University very generously hosting us with, look at this wonderful class. This is a cyber university, and we'll learn all about it through the video today. But first, I'd like to introduce Professor So, who has been a wonderful partner for Kansai University and made this available. So, first of all, thank you so much for having this possible event. And then now, look at that screen over there. We're actually broadcasting this event on their homepage. And on the Japan side, there is our office actually clicking on the broadcast at the moment and viewing us as well. So say hi. Hi. Yeah. Okay. よろしくお願いいたします。
Welcome to our Hwashin Educational Foundation. Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for joining this program and serve you to have a lesson in here. In our Hwashin Educational Foundation, there are 4 educational institutes. One is this Hwashin Cyber University, and the other is Busan Kyeongsan College and Busan Foreign High School, and we have kindergarten in our foundation. Especially this Hwashin Cyber University has a good equipment for study and to study and for other countries together. So this time we use this classroom. Firstly, I will show you our Hwashin Cyber University's introduction video. Then I will talk about it.
지금 당신은 미래를 클릭합니다. 클릭하면 꿈이 이루어집니다. 하신 사이버 대학교. 성공적인 미래를 약속하는 화신 사이버 대학교는 학교법인 화신학원 소속으로 2007년 지하 1층, 지상 8층의 독립 캠퍼스를 준공하여 사이버 대학교 설립에 완전한 준비를 마칩니다. 그 결과 2008년 고등교육법 적용에 의거한 최초 인가는 4년제 정규 사이버 대학인 아시아 태평양 디지털 대학교로 개교하게 됩니다. 2009년 화신 사이버 대학교로 교명을 변경, 글로벌 사이버 대학교로서의 규모와 경쟁력을 키워나가고 있습니다. 저희 화신 사이버 대학교는 내가 있는 곳이 곧 캠퍼스다라는 이념으로 인터넷만 연결되어 있으면 언제 어디서든 강의를 들으실 수 있으며 만여 명 이상의 학생이 동시 접속해도 문제가 없는 최첨단 서버 및 통신 시설을 갖추고 있습니다. 그리고 최강의 교수진과 단연간의 축적된 경험의 컨텐츠 개발 중은 학생 여러분이 지루해하지 않고 최고의 강의를 들으실 수 있도록 최고의 교육 컨텐츠를 제작하고 있습니다. 저희 화신의 교육 컨텐츠는 메인 스튜디오와 녹음실, 컨텐츠 제작실, 디자인실 등에서 모두 100% 자체 제작되고 있으며 여러 타기관에서 협조를 구하고 부러워하고 있는 저희 화신 사이버 대학교의 자랑이자 힘입니다. 이렇듯 최상의 컨텐츠와 지원 서비스, 첨단 시설을 갖춘 화신 사이버 대학교는 학생들의 학습 의욕을 고취시켜 글로벌 리더를 양성하는 평생 학습 사회의 요람이 될 것입니다. 국내는 물론 해외에서도 인정받는 사이버 대사, 세계의 중심에서 당당한 글로벌 리더로 살아가는 길. 그 꿈을 실현으로 화신 사이버 대사과 함께합니다.
私は韓国で学部ではスペイン語スペニッシュで勉強しました。
So in Korea he studied Spanish.
그리고 마스터 코스에서는 인터넷 국際経営を勉強しました。
In the master course he has a degree in international management, international business.
博士コースでは国際経営におけるリスクマネジメントを勉強しました。
For his PhD, he pursued risk management in international business.
私は学部とマスターコースと博士コースが全部違って、ちょっと日本の学部から見たら変に思われるかもしれません。
So he has different degree, different fields for each degree. So it might look strange to for example, a Japanese person who pursues degree.
しかし学部が違うことによって、知らない多様な分野のことを理解することができて、またそれが融合できてもっと新しいことを想像できることもありました。
But because it's interdisciplinary, that he was able to generate innovative ideas for business ideas and so on.
我々が勉強した歴史の世界史の中では1400年代から1500年代のスペインが統治した全世界を統治したそのヒストリーはほとんどありません。
In the world history, there is counting from 400 BC.
1400年代。
400s all the way up. There has not been any governance by the Spanish force.
なぜかとしたら我々が勉強しているそういう世界の特に韓国の場合は世界史の中ではその昔のイタリアと産業革命があったイギリスとか大きな国を中心に、歴史を勉強したからであります。
So the mainly has been studied is related to the industrial revolutions. So the history of England has been the main target, but not Spain.
ところで私はスペイン語を勉強してまたその時のミドルイースト中世のスペインがどういうふうに国際企業を経営しているかどういうふうに世界経済に影響したかなどを勉強をすることができました。
So in his study, he focused on the Spanish medieval time, how that Spanish language has been actually used in international business around that time.
ですから、我々が今まで勉強した学校の教科書ではまだまだ出ていないし、まず数多くの出来事や、文化や、政治や、経済の仕方などがあります。
So then many discoveries that are things that are not in the textbook, that are not really described in any historical research, is because it's that era and the focus was a blind spot.
今回コイルプログラムに参加した学生たちは国籍も違いますし、専攻も違いますし、いろんな学生が集まって新しい目標のために新しい体験をしていると思います。
So just like yourself, so you have been exploring among yourself, there's so much diversity within yourself. That creates a wonderful discovery, new discovery among yourselves.
ですから違う国の人たち、また違う国の文化と歴史を学ぶことによって今まで自分が持っている想像力を超えてもっと大きな発展があると思われます。
So we study about each other, we study about different culture, different backgrounds, so that you can go beyond your own imagination that you have now.
その中で一番大事なのは理解です。
The most important key here is understanding.
ですからこういういいプログラムを準備した本当に池田恵子先生をはじめ関西大学のプログラムを準備したスタッフ方たちに本当に感謝するとともにこの学生の未来のために、本当に素晴らしい機会になると思います。
We highly value the program like this, giving the opportunities to the students.
アプロこれから皆様のご発展ともっと大きな夢を持つようなことを期待しております。
We expect that everyone here to actually have a bigger dream and meet the bigger results coming out based on the experience that you have through this program.
もう一度、うちこの発信エデュケーショナルファウンデーション방문해 주신 여러분께 감사히感謝いたします。
On behalf of the Hassan Group, we thank you for coming and having a day with us. Okay, so today we're going to have a special professor. He's going to be given a talk. It's kind of familiar picture here, but now we have a new students joining from Busan University for studies as well. So it's a little bit different dynamics, and we seek your opinion discussions. Very much of an active session today, and I'm sure Dawn will take it from here to facilitate that.
All right, thanks everyone. So can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I think we've got some wonderful facilities here, so I don't know if anyone has the experience of this kind of an environment to know that it's like people going, no, it's really cool, right? So, and particularly for us at Kansai University and with IIG, with COIL initiatives, we really like the use of technology because that's one way that we can kind of cross cultures. We can do education that doesn't require people to get on a plane or boat, right, and travel around. So yeah, we're very impressed with that. So thank you for allowing us to have the time today to give the presentation. So just to give a bit of a quick intro, and I'm going to go through things pretty quickly, all right? So if you're struggling with how fast I'm going, right, please just put your hand up or just say, hey, Don, you're going too fast or whatever, because I'm mindful of time and I'll stop and explain, all right? But I thought that it might be a good idea, given that many of you don't have a background in formal studies of peace and conflict. Put your hand up if you've done at least one course on peace and conflict studies. 1, 2, 3, so 3 people, right? And on the Peace Boat voyage, we've been confronting many challenging issues, particularly as they relate to the Pacific region. So they might have involved, China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, many countries. So I thought it might be appropriate to give you a bit of a framework by which you can start to think about how could we approach peace and how could we approach analysis of conflict. Yeah. So if you've got any questions as I go through, please just yell them out. I like to do it as a kind of an interactive presentation. So how could we conceptualize peace and conflict? I guess a starting point, well, we could look at how do we conceptualize peace? How do academics and researchers understand this? How do applied scientists treat it? And how do we treat this in terms of conflict? So for example, there appears to be conflict between Japan and Korea at the moment. How do we understand that as a kind of a conflict? What kind of conflict? Perhaps we can look at models of conflict and conflict resolution. Yeah? So practical strategies by which nations or persons can manage conflicts. And I'll give you a bit of an overview if we have time. Just the role of the formal academic study of peace and conflict. Alright, so let's start with the dove. It's kind of like an internationally recognised symbol of peace here, but what is it? What is peace? Does anyone have any suggestions?
No war, no boundaries, no discrimination.
No boundaries, no discrimination. Anybody else?
Everybody is equal.
Everybody is equal.
Everyone has a complete concept of justice.
Right. Complete concept of justice.
People don't worry about their life or danger.
People not worried about their life, literally their life, or being in danger. maybe get one or two more. I don't want to spend too long, but this is good. So,
？No war, no fighting, no anger. No war, no fighting, no anger.
Ooh, that sounds like a...
I was translating.
Yeah, so I'll continue from that because that sounds pretty comprehensive. So you've got some clear ideas what peace might mean. And what's interesting is if I got you to do this in different languages, we might come up with some interesting observations, yeah? So my apologies, because I'm giving the presentation in English. So I'm drawing from English or, let's say Western traditions towards what peace might be. But there are many, many other perspectives. Maybe we could look at some cultural conceptualizations of peace. I won't spend too much time on this because I suspect some of you might be familiar. But we could look at Eastern conceptualizations. Yeah? Is anyone familiar with Eastern conceptualizations as opposed to kind of Western? Yeah, so it could be Eastern conceptualizations. So here's a few. Let's see if any of you recognize these. I'll put them up quickly. And I suspect, for example, for students from North America, you'd be like, yeah, you might not be familiar with any of these, right?
Yeah.
How about this? Yeah? All right. So here are some traditions of thought. We could draw from those. We could see what sort of connections, what sort of similarities, how are they dissimilar when we come to conceptualize peace. And then I guess we could say Judeo-Christian kind of conceptualizations. And this for me is more about what I know, given that I was born in Australia. It's very Judeo-Christian kind of a culture, right? So it might be Jewish traditions, for example, and they emphasize peacefulness, strong tradition in Jewish writing. Christian and Islamic traditions, interestingly, both are less directive in terms of requesting peace. They make reference to it, right? But perhaps in a kind of an unusual way. Many texts exhort for both war and peace. Yeah? So, peaceful activities, living a peaceful life, these are desirable, but also waging war may be appropriate given the circumstances. All right, so we could look at these kind of conceptualizations, and we could look at how do we understand what meanings of peace are. So, peace could be recognized by its absence. Is there peace between Korea and Japan at the moment? Right? Is there peace between the United States and Japan at the moment? Is there peace between Ikeda Sensei and myself at the moment? Well, don't worry, because I'm going to talk about conflict resolution, so we will have peace, right? Johann Galtung has proposed, this is like the founder of the contemporary scholarly approach to peace and conflict studies. And you had a brief mention of this in some of your seminars over the last few days. He proposed two kinds of peace. The first one is a negative peace, right? And the other one is a positive peace. So this is a kind of a starting point. Interestingly enough, his PhD, his background was in mathematics. All right, so not as a kind of social scientist, as a mathematician. So negative peace and positive peace. If we look at negative peace, his formulation, he says it's the absence of direct violence. So Ikeda Sensei and I, there's no visible direct kind of violence between us, so it's kind of peaceful, yeah? But let's say we were engaged in an argument or a physical confrontation, ooh, that doesn't seem particularly peaceful. But in our case, there's the absence of that violence, so it's a kind of peace, but it's a kind of a negative peace. What do you say is a negative peace? Peace is found when war is absent. So we could go back and say, oh, well, is Japan at war with any other countries at the moment? Not that I'm aware of, so maybe people in Japan think, yes, we are very peaceful, we are at peace, right? What about North and South Korea? Are they at war? How about the United States and some other country? Are they at war? Yeah, possibly, right. So peace is found when war is absent. Okay, so we can think of this as like Pax Romana. Think of, you know, a huge empire like the Roman Empire, yeah? And we might say, well, it's very peaceful, but that might just be because we don't see any explicit overt conflict, but people might be very unhappy, all right? So it's a kind of a negative peace. It's not the kind of peace that we might want to desire. And I've sort of put up there something like South Korea and North Korea, and I guess for today we heard there were some demonstrations. Maybe it's a kind of a negative peace between Korea and Japan at the moment. You know, there's no war, there's no military conflict, but there's economic issues, right? And there seems to be political protests, so it's a kind of a negative piece. Okay, so what about these concepts? So again, my apologies, because this is in English, and it's kind of drawing from, I guess, Judeo-Christian concepts, but we could have something like inner peace. Are you familiar with that? What's the experience like for you? Like, oh, I feel at peace. I had a good conversation with Ikeda Sensei and I feel at peace. Yeah. So that's a kind of a psychological piece, right? Or it might be a spiritual piece that we might be talking about. And then we can have things like something is pacified, or we pacify something, or the pacification. Yeah. People are so, we give people so much good food to eat, lots of K-pop, lots of J-pop, and they're kind of pacified. But is that a kind of a peace? You know? And if we say things like peace against terrorism, we're going to have peace against terrorism, does that even make sense? Does that have any meaning? All right, so one of the interesting things that Galton proposed, he said you need to look at something like structural violence. And this is a kind of violence which is embedded in social, cultural and economic institutions. Okay? So this is not like a direct physical kind of a violence. It's violence that's within or contained within systems, human systems. For example, if you deny people important rights, that's a form of structural violence. Hunger, political repression, being psychologically alienated from people and systems, exclusion and discrimination. These could be seen as symptoms of some kind of structural violence. So for example, let's say I have a school and I invite you all in as students, but for whatever reason, some of you feel as if the senseis, the teachers, treat you in a different way. They're not as forthcoming. They don't seem to be as warm and caring towards you, but they seem to act that way towards other students. So this might be a symptom. This is kind of a violence, right? And it might be not a psychological issue that, oh, this particular professor is racist, or this particular professor has problems with gender. It might be the system itself which perpetuates a kind of a violence. So here's one way to look at it. It's kind of like the ant farm. Did anyone have an ant farm as a child? Or is this like a 1970s thing? Okay, so one person. So this was like a kind of a toy, you can put soil in it and you can watch the ants. So one way to think of our cultures, I guess, in terms of how this might work is at the individual level. So we as individuals, we are exposed to kind of violence in our lives, we're seeking peace, this kind of stuff. But we don't live our lives generally as individuals, we're in groups. So we're a group here, yeah? So all of the students on the UMAP COIL program, we're in a group. We're a group on the Peace Boat. The Peace Boat is made up of many different groups, yeah? And we're in a broader group here. We're currently in Busan. We're in Korea. Many groups, right? So we sort of look at those groups, and the groups then represent the organisations. Yeah? But maybe we want to go further. We want to look at the social institutions that contain, that give a kind of a frame, the kind of ant farm for all of this. And then we can go more broadly. And I would say the thing that's sort of overarching to all of this is culture. All right? So culture is not just a product of these individual entities or the individual ants, right? We need to look at all of them. So for example, if we look at violence at the individual level, maybe that has something to do with culture. And then we can go back to, for example, it could be an organisation. All right, so that's the negative piece. What about this positive piece? Hopefully you get a feeling that this is the good piece, right? This is the stuff we want. Well, positive piece, at least in Galton's formulation, is the absence of indirect and structural violence. The absence. So there is no indirect or structural violence. This is not easy to get. This is very difficult to obtain. because this might require you to change individuals, groups, organisations, entire societies, right? Changing cultures. So this is a big ask. So here's one sort of easier way to conceptualise it. We've kind of got a fulcrum, where, you know, a seesaw. So this is kind of a peace-war continuum. At one end we have violence, right? So we can have greater or lesser amounts of violence or extended violence. More of that could eventually lead to war. So it pivots the seesaw towards war. What do you think is on the other side? Peace. Is this a trick question? Justice. Right? I had a conversation the other day with a student, yeah, and it was pretty much about this, right? On the one hand, we have violence. On the other hand, it's not peace, it's justice that might be the counterbalance, right? And if we get sufficient justice, that's going to tip the scales towards peace, a positive peace, not negative peace. Right? So you might find that a useful way to think about it. All right, so I'm going through this very quickly. So I just want to reiterate. I talked about what is peace, right? Some meanings of peace, negative peace, positive peace, and the peace-war continuum. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Unless anybody has a good question, I'm going to move on. Okay, I'm going to move on to this. All right, so that's peace, one way to approach peace. Let's look at this. What is conflict? What is conflict? I get one or two opinions, yes? What is conflict?
Injustice. Injustice.
Yeah, injustice.
When a need isn't being met.
When a need is not being met.
I want to ask, what is the difference between violence and direct violence?
Okay, violence and direct violence. Think of it this way. And this is a really coarse example. I punch you. It seems really direct, right? But what if I walk past you and I go, right? And I keep doing it. And then I say something about your ethnicity, your country. So it's not like I'm physically attacking you, but it's sort of violence. It makes you feel bad. Yeah? Does that help? Okay. All right, so just in the interest of time, because I would normally do something like this much longer, so, just think about what conflict is and what it means to you. How do you treat some things as being conflict and other things as not being conflict? Yeah? So let's have a look at the meanings, some kind of scholarly meanings of conflict. Conflict is a universal feature of human society. So the things, scholars interested in peace and conflict studies, we're generally not interested in, we must do away with conflict. It's kind of silly, it's naive kind of thinking, because it seems to be a part, historically and contemporary, in sort of kind of modern thought, conflict is part of the human condition. Right? It involves economic differentiation, social change, cultural formation. It could be psychological development, could be political organisation. But conflict, and a more formal approach, is overt. We see overt, explicit conflict in the formation of conflict parties. It's not like a happy party, right? It's just, it's a kind of an interaction which is not necessarily good for any of the individual members. So we term that conflict parties. Conflict parties. These are groups that have or are perceived to have mutually incompatible goals. Can you think of any examples of conflict parties? And I'll give you a really easy clue. Where are we now? Right? So it could be South Korea and North Korea. It could be Japan. It could be China. Right? So, but at an individual level, it could be Ikeda Sensei and me. What would you like for lunch?
I've already had one.
I haven't had lunch. We've got a conflict where the conflict party's two people, mutually incompatible goals. She doesn't want to have lunch because she's eaten lunch. I desperately want lunch. Okay? Or it could be Korea, Japan, something big. All right? The conflict parties, identities. Right? The identities involved in the conflict party. So this could be Japanese identity, the identity of the Japan state. But it could also be the identity of me, Dom. How do I see myself? It could also be my football team. right? How we see ourselves, what our mascot is, what our values are, right? Levels at which the conflict is contested. Do I have conflict with just a few of the members in my organisation? Do I have a conflict with many members? Does my entire organisation have a conflict with many other organisations? And the issues that you're fighting over, right, may vary over time and may themselves be disputed. So I'm not presenting this to you to say, oh look, here's an easy way to think about conflict and it's easy, A, B, C, we can solve it. What I'm saying here is conflict is extraordinarily difficult to analyse. I'm going to give you a few kind of suggestions for how you can do that. So here's some conflict types. So it's like negative peace and positive peace. Instead of just saying conflict is bad, I avoid conflict, right? We can have destructive conflicts, but we can also have constructive conflicts. Conflicts in which actually it's kind of a symptom of a problem. It's a symptom of a kind of illness in a system. And maybe if we address it, we can make it not necessarily a cure, but we can make things a little bit better. All right? Deutsch, so you can see this has a long history. All right? So here's an example of conflict intensity. So here we might have non-violent, low intensity. It's very latent, and here's a kind of a definition. There's a positional difference over definable values of national meaning. It's considered to be a latent conflict if demands are articulated by one of the parties and perceived by the other as such. So you could probably think of some examples around the world right now where nations are in conflict, and it's kind of low, it's not violent, you know, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. It keeps going on and on and on. Let's ratchet up the level of intensity a bit. So this is still non-violent, and we would still consider it low intensity. But at level 2, we would call this a manifest. Manifest means to make appear. A manifest conflict includes the use of measures that are located in the stage preliminary to violent force. This includes, for example, verbal pressure, threatening explicitly with violence, or the imposition of economic sanctions. So do you see how this could relate to conflict between individuals? If you talk to me like that again, I swear to God I'm going to hit you, right? I'm not actually hitting, I'm threatening to do it. Or it could be, if you continue in this way, our ministers have decided that we will impose trade sanctions for the rest of the financial year. So it's a threat, but it's an economic threat. Okay? Let's ratchet it up even more. Medium. Now we're starting to get into what arguably is violent conflict, a crisis. A crisis is a tense situation in which at least one, and it could be more, it could be many, at least one of the parties uses violent force in sporadic incidents. All right. Let's jump right to this one, because this is the one that you're probably more familiar with. Violent, high-intensity war. A violent conflict in which violent force is used with a certain continuity in an organised and systematic way. Right. So maybe things go from here, they get to here. Can we get it to go back to here? What do we do when we get to a severe crisis? What do we do when war happens? How do we get things to go back? So that's what I'm going to look at. So the kind of violent stuff is the stuff that we really want to avoid. So here's some conflict models and frameworks. All right? And you can use these in your own personal life. Any sort of conflict that you have, you can also apply these to state and national level conflicts. So I'm going to just look at 4. How am I doing for time? Okay.
Another 20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes. I've gone too fast. My apologies. I really thought I had less time. But
And then we make a time for discussion.
yeah, because we're going to have a discussion. Okay, so I'll look at these. So here's some models. Get ready. The first one is the only one you need. This will help you manage any conflict. I'm not exaggerating. This is a model that has been used for interpersonal conflicts, relationship troubles, disputes with employees, and it's also gone all the way up to state level conflicts. All right? Here. That's it. That's all you need to know. No, you need to pay attention. When you think there's a conflict, right? Try to be an analyst. Try to be a little bit objective and try to figure out what is the conflict, what's driving it, who's involved, who are the conflict parties, what are the issues. Okay, now being less silly, Galtung proposed a kind of an ABC model, so that's how you can remember this. And in psychology, it's always ABC. Right? Attitudes. The conflict parties may have different attitudes to whatever they're in conflict with. My attitude towards South Korea at the moment is South Korea needs to stop making all of these political demands, right? And people should get along with each other. Right? My attitude is South Korea is correct with the current issue with Japan, and the international community needs to support Korean interests. Right? So people have a different attitude, but that's not enough. People will engage in different behaviours. Right? And then there's some kind of contradiction. So what Galtung proposed is you can analyse any conflict with this ABC, the attitude, the behaviour, and the contradiction with the conflict parties. All right. So this is one model. That's a model of conflict. Okay. Another proposal was with the conflict parties we can look, is there direct violence? Do the conflict parties engage in direct violence? Is there cultural violence? All right, so that could be discrimination, prejudice, systems where certain people get access to educational opportunities and other people do not. That could be one example. And structural violence. Now this is a model of violence. All right? It's a bit harder to remember. Cultural violence, direct violence, and structural violence. And the final one that we might want to look at, guess what? This is peace. So we've got peacemaking. So we've got these conflict parties, they're in conflict. How do we get them to make peace? How do we kind of solve the problems? And we also need to look at how we can build peace. How we can build things over time to prevent the occurrence of direct or structural violence. How we can build better communities would be one example of that. Or if we have a conflict, right, and it's kind of started to be solved, how do we keep the peace? So you'd probably be familiar with this in terms of things like UN peacekeeping missions. Right? But this could also be on a personal level. Think of when you have an argument with a friend. Right? When do you engage in this? Peace building, peacemaking, or peacekeeping? Well, the peacekeeping is like maybe you've got a dispute with someone that you care about, but you feel that you can't tell them because you think they're going to respond in a really bad way. So maybe you're doing this, you're just trying to keep the peace. You don't want to set them off, you don't want them to get angry or upset, right? But maybe you need to look at the other two things. All right. So that would be one example of peace, one model. All right, so I'm going to move to another model now. So this is the second model, and this is Galtung's models of conflict, violence, and peace. And as I say, this is particularly the first one, conflict, it's so simple you don't need any training. As long as the conflict parties can sit down and go, hey, we could use this to map out or to analyse what's actually happening. Why is everybody upset? Why is there violence? What's going on? You could use ABC. All right, here's a more complex one. This is a model of conflict escalation and de-escalation. So this kind of treats it, when you're looking at conflict, it goes through stages. Conflict isn't just an on or off thing. And you can probably have experiences in your own personal lives where you've had conflicts with people. Was it just a sudden conflict and then it turned off? Or did it sort of build up? And then maybe you didn't really resolve it, but things eventually got better. And then maybe the conflict came back again, right? So this might help you. So in this model, we have difference. So time is going this way, all right? We have difference. There's a difference of opinion. There's a difference of attitude. There's a difference over what should be done, all right? That might lead to a contradiction, all right? Two opposing positions, or maybe it's 10 different positions. That can make polarization. People start to become very exaggerated in their particular position. So you might start off having a difference, like, I don't really like to eat bento. I just make that example, so it's fine. I don't like curry. Curry's too spicy. But you go through this and you end up saying things like, curry is just terrible. Anybody who eats curry, they're a complete idiot. Who in their right mind would eat curry? Ugh, you know, it gets exaggerated. That's what we mean when we say polarization. Think about what's happening with Korea and Japan at the moment. Where are they on this? Right? Then you get to violence. Right? So remember, I'm not necessarily saying that's physical violence, but it could be different kinds of violence. But this eventually will lead to war. Right? Then you have something after war, right? When everybody's exhausted, ceasefire, agreement, a normalization of the events, and a reconciliation. All right. So you might find that a more useful model. So here's a more complex one, hourglass model of conflict containment, conflict settlement, and conflict transformation. So there's kind of three things in one here, and it builds upon the first two. So it looks a bit complicated, so I'll just step you through it very quickly. If we go down this way, right, you can see it's something like war is in the middle, right? This is where we're starting off, goes down through the hourglass out the bottom. So we go here, conflict transformation, conflict settlement, conflict containment, conflict settlement, conflict transformation, and that's linked to war. Right? So here is the kind of stuff that you've looked at already. You start off with a difference, there's a contradiction, things are getting worse, polarization, violence, war, then we go through the kind of, the move away from direct violence, ceasefire agreement, normalization. But here are some things that we can also look that sort of match each of these stages. So we could start off where we've got the difference. We could look at cultural peace building. Then things sort of get worse. Maybe we need to look at structural peace building. Things are getting worse where we have violence. That's when we start to engage in peacekeeping, right? Then we have war. The goal there is let's limit the war, let's limit the conflicts. And as we proceed through there, we go back to these stages, peacekeeping, peacemaking, etc. So you might find this a more, it builds upon the previous model. You might find it a little bit more sophisticated for your needs, for your particular conflicts. So we have a contradiction. There's a potential conflict here. All right, so we're talking about direct violence. So people getting murdered, people getting sexually assaulted, raped, and murdered. All right, and a struggle over resources. How on earth do we conceptualize this conflict? How do we do that, and how can we think about ways in which we can, solve the conflict? So they've done it like a kind of a tree, right? So down here you've got the kind of root causes, the root systemic things that might have led to the conflicts developing. Then you've got the trunk, and then you've got the branches, and these are kind of the outcomes. These are the systems, all right, of this particular set of conflicts. So the main ones seem to be people were alienated from their land. People were unable to purchase land. It was too expensive. Wealthy people seem to buy up all the land, leaving everybody else with nothing. Okay? But underlying that was a number of causes that could be identified. So, for example, there were corrupt political leaders, people taking lots of bribes. There were problems with law and access to the law. There was unequal development. There were colonial boundaries in place that created all sorts of difficult issues. And then up here, these were the symptoms. Unfair representation, looting and stealing, individuals and groups raiding other communities, people were living in fear, and there was killing. Murders were committed. So this is the kind of thing that you might find more helpful with a very, very, what could be called almost an intractable problem, something that seems too difficult to figure out. Maybe a conflict tree could help you. All right, so I'm getting towards the end now. So these are just some models. There are many models, okay? I don't have enough time to go into these models in any more depth, but if you're interested, just start with the first one. Right? There's a very big literature. What about approaches to conflict? What I want you to do now is think of something in your own personal life and apply it to this. Right? So here is a way that you can, when are you really concerned for the other person or the organisation? A conflict's happened. Do you care about what happens to the other person or not? So for example, if it's like a boyfriend or girlfriend or something, maybe your concern for them is very high. If it's just a kind of random person that you come into contact with and have a conflict, you're not really that concerned about it. And the other thing to think of is how much concern do you have for yourself in the conflict? Right? Do you want a good outcome? Are you prepared to fight for what you believe in? Are you prepared to make lots and lots of changes so that other people are happier or not? Maybe you're prepared to just be quiet. Okay. Well, here's some approaches. And what I want you to do is think where you might feel most comfortable. If you have a high concern for others and a low concern for yourself, you tend to adopt a yielding strategy. You will give way to their demands. You will agree to go along with their plans. You won't get into an argument with them. You'll go, yeah, you're right. Okay? That could be one approach. Here's another one. On the other hand, if your concern for your own interests is very high, but your concern for the others is very low, contending. You will push for your position, right? Regardless of the impact on the other party. If it's individuals, you don't care how that person feels. This is important to you. Your concern is very high for yourself, all right? On the other hand, if your concern for the others is quite low, and your concern for yourself in this particular instance is also low, you just withdraw. You just avoid the conflict altogether. So when the conflict happens, you're like, later guys, I'm out of here. Because you don't care. You don't care about the impact for you because it's low, and you don't care about the impact on other people. But if you've got a kind of, you are concerned for the other people, or person, or organisation, or country, and you are concerned for yourself, sort of at a moderate level of concern, that's where we get compromising. You're prepared to compromise your position. You're prepared to make changes in your demands. You're prepared to kind of say you're sorry, as long as the other party says they're sorry too, right? So you're prepared to work with that. What do you think might be up there? What do you think might exist here? Your concern for others is very high, and your concern for yourself, the concern for your own outcome is high. What do you think we would call that? Problem solving. Anyone surprised by that? You just try and solve the problems. So, you may or may not fit into what they're solving. Alright. Here's another one, zero-sum and non-zero-sum outcomes. Cain wants a good outcome. Cain wants to have high satisfaction. Abel wants to have high satisfaction as well. Often what we find is that if Abel's satisfaction, they want something to happen. Cain wants something to happen. It's in opposition, and they can't get agreement. Everybody loses. We call that a lose-lose scenario. What tends to be common, we assign that a value of 0. This is like game theory, right? On the other hand, if Abel gets really high satisfaction, wins, gets their demands met, and Cain's is low, it might be a lose-win. One party wins, they get what they want, don't care about the other person. But we can also move to win-win, where all of the parties' satisfaction is high, but that requires problem solving, because that might not be easy to figure out. What do people actually want? Here's another one, and I think some of you will be aware of this. Who's heard of the prisoner's dilemma? Yeah, a few people are nodding. So the prisoner's dilemma is basically this. Two people are arrested for a crime, right? They stole money from a bank. Let's just say stole money from a bank. All right. Two people have been arrested. The police hold them in 2 cells, and they're given a proposition, which is, if you confess, if you say you were one of the people, all right, we'll go easy on you, all right. If you remain silent, all right, well, we're going to go and talk to your friend who did this as well. So basically, the options are this, all right, that if B confesses, all right, there's some outcomes that they can get. If B confesses, and they're thinking, what's my friend going to do? Are they going to confess? If I say, yeah, we did it, and they say we did it, they both get 5 years in prison. On the other hand, if B confesses, and you think, but my friend is not going to say anything, yeah, that's good, I'll say, yeah, I did it, or they did it, right? You'll get let out because you helped. Thanks for helping. We'll put all the blame on that person. They get 20 years in prison, all right? Here's another, and here's the same thing. If B remains silent, but A confesses, they get to go free, B goes for 20 years. And then we've got this one here. If both of you remain silent, you'll both get 1 year. So what the prisoner's dilemma shows us, and I don't have time to go into it, is what you might intuitively think is the best outcome. Not if you're arrested, I'm saying in many situations, you think, I want to act on the information that's best for me. I'm going to do things with my own self-interest as my only goal. I don't care about the other person, I don't care about the other party. What this suggests is when we act in our own self-interest, the payoff can be bad, right? But if we act in the interest of others for a kind of a way in which, on the basis of limited information, the outcome might actually be better. And that's what the prisoner's dilemma has been used to demonstrate for many years. All right, so I'm going to wrap up now because we've got some technical problems. Two parties, how do we solve issues? Party A, party B. These could be people, they could be companies, they could be nations. There's conflict between them, information flow between them. We can have third-party arbitration. So I can't talk to Ikeda Sensei, we can't communicate. We get another person to act as the arbitrator. So we don't communicate with each other to solve the conflict. We communicate with the third party, the arbitrator, who gives us the messages. Another way we could do it, perhaps more helpful, is we have mediation with a third party. And with mediation, it means that there's a back and forth, and it's and there's a mediator. All right? And we can have coercive. We force people into mediation. We say you must embark in mediation. Maybe there will be a penalty if you don't. All right? But we can also have non-coercive forms of mediation. I think I'm going to skip some slides now. My apologies, because I really hate to do that. I know it's really annoying. But here's some ways in which we can start to think about how to transform conflicts in which one party has all the power. All right? So a lot of what I've spoken about is like, well, doesn't this mean that everybody has access, we all have the same power? What do you do if there's an asymmetry? What if, for example, a nation state invades a sovereign country which has no military? How do these people manage that conflict? This is a model that might assist with that. And finally, here's a third side model. This suggests that all conflicts will eventually lead to destructive violence. And what you have to do is identify one of these three stages. And it's like treating it like a disease. If there's latent tensions, you need to step in and prevent things. If you don't, it will move to an overt conflict. At that point, doing this does nothing. You can't prevent it. It's just going to happen, right? But you can resolve the issues. You can resolve the conflicts. Unfortunately, if you cannot manage that, it then proceeds to power struggle. These two will not help you at that point. You need to contain things. It's kind of like harm minimization, all right? Otherwise, you will get destructive violence. All right, let's go through that real quickly. But I think that's pretty much it. There's some complex multi-track. You can talk to me about this later. But it all comes back to this. So remember that model? I told you, the ABC, the ABC model, right? Here's an example where the ABC model is part of, this is a huge, like a kind of a model that you could apply at the UN level, nation states. But at its heart, it still uses this little simple idea, all right? ABC. All right, so I'll wrap it up there. My apologies for some of the technical issues, but you did a remarkable job. Ikeda Sensei managed to keep my machine running. It's like old school analog technology. Maybe we can have that as a discussion question. Or maybe we can have that as a discussion question. If peace is so good, why do we seem to have so much conflict? Yeah, okay. So we've got some time, so how about you break off into groups, and I'll leave these two up here. You don't have to discuss those exact topics. I think there's enough material there to talk about, but how do you understand conflict? How do you understand peace? That would
Let's
be
do
perfect.
group of 4. So grab your beaver. So 4 of you here, and the next 4, that's Alan, and then Jimmy, and the rest. Okay, that's good. Discuss among yourselves about those questions, and then here I think everybody
sometimes look bad. But I feel like fashion is a lot different. Awareness and united.
Okay, so time to wrap up. So maybe I can just get one, I think we've got enough groups, I get just one quick observation from each group. So either of those questions, or if you had your own response.
Is that example good enough? Does that example make sense?
Up to you. Okay, everybody?
So for the first one, is conflict desirable in some circumstances? I think that first depends on the definition of conflict, what you think it is. So personally, I think conflict is when at least two people are in disagreement, whether it's they don't know which restaurant to go to. So I think that conflict is desirable because it allows your needs to come up and your words to be heard in that form.
All right, so there you have a response. Conflict can be desirable because it allows needs and allows your voice to be heard. Maybe if you didn't have conflict, we wouldn't have a means by which we could address those things. Yeah, okay. They're all pointing at you, so I'm assuming you're okay with that.
So we come up with the idea that constructive conflict will be desirable in circumstances. Because constructive conflict is conflict happening, but for a desire to building a better future, in order to just have the balance among each other.
Thank you. All right, yeah, you guys ready to go?
So we think when we have a conflict, possibly will be like information is not symmetric. Like everyone has their opinion on one issue, and not only disagreement, maybe sometimes you agree with others' opinions, but sometimes you will not fully understand what the issue is, and you will have a misunderstanding, which will lead to conflict.
So it seems like misunderstandings, yeah, is going to be a part of any sort of conflict.
So we didn't really came up with a conclusion, but there is an interesting opinion. Like the opinion is like war or this conflict is necessary because that's why the country is built and it is strong.
Time for the final one. He's sort of shrugging away. Yeah, I haven't heard you give response to that.
I think conflict comes from misunderstanding, and then when both of them disagree, and there's the forms of problem, and
I shared my personal example of conflict and being in a conflict differently on this ship different times, and I found that my conflict was desirable in this whole thing that we're on because I want everyone to get all of the information that they should be getting. And I guess that I sort of try to think of the graph, and I don't think it would be yielding, because yielding would be saying I agree, So I'm thinking it would be problem solving because there would be conflict in myself, and I'm trying to solve conflict with others as well.
Thinking about this, I've always started to think like, if so, there is two people or two something, and if both of them try, their attitude is like trying to solve the problem between them, do you think it's still like there is conflict? I mean, most of case I hear like conflict, they have very different like opinion or something, but most of case they like pass the, how do you say, level, they want to solve between them. I feel like in everyday life when I see news, they're not actually like trying like to talk each other and like make it better and stuff. So I don't know.
All right, thanks for that. So it might be, so for that, the basic ABC model, it might be that the conflict parties, they share the same kind of an attitude, so that they think this is what we should be doing, or we want these kind of things to work out really well. But the behavior part, they might be engaging in very different behaviors. Even though it's the same attitude, their behaviors are very dissimilar. Maybe they're incompatible. And that's one of the things that's leading that to keep, it's driving the conflict. And to reverse that, maybe the behaviors are sort of very similar, but the attitudes underlying those behaviors are very different. Yeah. So I guess the way I would give an example of this, and I think I might have mentioned this, I have an intention to apologise to you. All right? I'm thinking about it, I want to apologise to you. If I do that in an Australian way or a North American way, I'll be like, look, I have to say, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that you were put in that situation. I feel terrible about it. I've been thinking about this a lot. You see what I'm doing? I'm making a legitimate kind of account. I'm talking about my feelings. I'm sorry. I'm giving the reasons. And then I say that I'm sorry, right? But if I was doing that in a Japanese cultural environment, I wouldn't do that. It would be, sumimasen. I would just immediately get to the apology, and I wouldn't give my account of it. Does that make sense? So just in that tiny little example, apologies have very, very different functions. So if I try to do the kind of Australian, North American apology in a Japanese context, people will see that as a non-apology. People will see that as making excuses. It's all about me. It's all about my bad feeling. When I should be apologising for everybody else's bad feeling. So my intent is to apologise. Let's just say it's Japanese kind of one. My intent is to apologise, but you don't think the apology is legitimate. Yeah? So that could drive the conflict. So we might even have to look at maybe some really, really big issues, big conflicts you have in your life. It's not because somebody doesn't apologise or isn't sorry. It's just the way in which that takes place. It just could be behaviour. It could be an inappropriate form. Does that help answer the... I'm trying to give an example to flesh it out. All right, so I think that's it. So I hope you enjoyed that and got something productive out of it. And for those of you who've done some peace and conflict studies, just treat it like a bit of a refresher course, given that we've been on a journey for over a week now, and we've looked at some really, really big conflicts, historical conflicts and conflicts that are taking place right now. Yeah, thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for allowing us to have this wonderful opportunity here in a very top-notch cyber classroom here. And I think we had a very good discussion and a key concept that we can carry along for the remaining of the journey as well. So we're going to next, you guys are going on the bus and they're going to the United Nations Graveyard, which is one of the very, very unusual place that they have in Busan. Right? And after that, you'll have a little bit of a chance to explore the town, and Korean students will actually be the tour guide for you. So you have the language issue, if they're willing to come with us. The language issue will be solved on that part. Alright, so enjoy that little bit of time there too. But before, I would like to have, if that's okay with you, I would like to spend a few more minutes here to do a group photo. You guys are so expert about it now, So you know what to do. Let's find a good place we can actually get all together and leave it at the corner, okay? Come this way. And then take your position. I know that there's one. You always stand in the same place. Well, you guys already know where your position is. I didn't know at the moment.
Sorry.
Please have Crystal Sensei for a okay?
Air guitar.
야, 사진 하나
Okay, say you